You can do
Right.
political art. I mean, I have a almost 2.5 million page book called uh, a Norwegian in the Family, which is
Yeah.
about a crime family and whatnot. And um, you know, when you're doing I, when you're doing any kind of art, yes, there are going to be moments. One of my favorite, if you want to call it epiphanic moments, I don't know if you're familiar with the paintings of Andrew Wyeth.
Maybe.
Um, his father N.C. Wyeth was a famous illustrator. His son Jamie Wyeth is also a famous painter. Have you ever heard of the Helga paintings?
No, no,
No.
I'll look into
Okay,
it.
but you've probably seen the Christina's World, the crippled girl on the hill looking towards a
Yes,
farmhouse in the
yes,
distance.
right,
It's one of
right.
the top 10, 12 most famous paintings in America,
I
in the
see.
20th
Yeah,
century.
yeah, yeah.
Now, Wyeth, my favorite painting, or one of the paintings that sticks out to me more so even than that far more famous painting, and I don't remember the name of the
Hmm.
painting, but it's a painting of, it's like behind a barn, there's like a woodshed, there's a picnic table, there's a deer carcass, or maybe it's a carcass of some other animal hanging off a tree limb, just drying out. You can see the tools and implements. You can see someone has been there recently, but they're not in the painting. And so you're just left there with some animal has been just slaughtered or de-skinned or whatever you want to call it, and the actor in the piece is missing from the
Mhm.
frame. And is he coming back? Did he just leave? Why did he leave? You can ask all these questions. And epiphanically, if you want to do that, things are as they are. I've used that line a handful of times, I guess, in poems. It's things are what they are, and in life, you can make of it what you will. I'm not a believer in art of this bullshit that people will say, art isn't meant to give answers; it's meant to ask questions. Fucking bullshit. Herman Melville didn't write fucking Moby Dick because he wanted to leave you asking questions. He knew the answers.
Yeah,
They may
yeah,
be wrong answers
yeah.
in some instances. Out of 100 possible questions, maybe the answers that you could get from Melville, 92 of them you'd agree with, and 8 of them you wouldn't. But he knew the answers, and the art is not about asking the questions, but it's about bringing people to a moment where they can understand something, whether
Yes,
it's the
exactly.
sea rolling on as it did 5,000 years ago, or whatever it might be. And I think too often there are these formulas. Yes, I'm a believer in general principles, but not in lock hard rules. I think whether we're talking about science and we're talking about things like the Big Bang or whatnot, there are things that you can assume about something, but the more you look, the more you tend to know that you know less than you think, which
Yeah,
is another kind of cliche. And in art, it's more about focusing on these little things. They could be an into a character. For example, I just started a play on. It's going to be on Catherine the Great, and my into it was, what if I had a black female character in the modern day, just after the Trump Kamala Harris election, and she's got some emotional issues dealing not from race issues, but just from herself, and
mm,
she's drawn to Catherine the Great, and her character is also named Catherine, though with a K, and and how that might play out. Does she have a fantasy life? And I'm not certain exactly where I'm going with it, but I know I'm on the right track. Um, so it's one of those things. I'm very much a pragmatist. Whatever
yeah.
works works. If I had written a short story or a poem or a whole stand, I'll give you an example. I ran a thing called the Uptown Poetry Group. You might have heard
Mhm,
me talk about it
mhm.
years ago in Minneapolis when I lived there. Um, and I once had this poem, this big poem about 6 or 7 pages, on the Battle of Little Bighorn in Custer. And I'd written it, and it was well written, but something wasn't working. And the most ignorant person at that particular group, a woman who only came once and who was a terrible poet, made an offhanded comment where she said something about time, or said the time sequence was wrong. And I thought to myself, not that she's right, but the reason that the poem flowed very much A to B linearly. And I thought, what if I broke up the poem
Mhm,
and
mhm.
had uh, Benteen and Custer and the American soldiers, the time is skewed and mixed things up, and it became a much better poem.